Hello everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be tying a little variant pattern of the Frenchie, which is a super productive nymph pattern. To start with here, I've got Tactics BL 450 barbless hook in the vise with a gold slotted tungsten bead to match. And I'm going to go ahead and start by laying down a little bit of lead wire. Particularly we use this for Euro nymphing style fishing, and I like to add a little bit of weight. My light here just a little bit. So I'm using .010 lead wire. Looking for probably about 9 or 10. On this is a 12. On the as you go down in size, you obviously want to go less wraps, but I like to get about 9 or 10, and I go ahead and seat that in to the slotted bead and kind of wiggle it around here, and it'll seat right in, and really that will hold your bead in place. Then we're going to come in start tying in our thread material. I'm using UTC 70 in a brown. So I'm going to start this right behind the lead. Clip that off. And we're going to wrap back really down to where the bend is starting before we tie in our tail material. So for typical Frenchie calls for pheasant tail for the tailing material. I'm using Coq de Leon in a light speckled. It's much more durable. I like the sheen that it gives off, and it's a little bit sparse, a little bit more sparse as well, which I like. So I'm only looking for maybe four or five of these things, of these fibers. I'm going to go ahead and clip them off, and then I'm going to line them up here, and I'm looking for less than the body length. So if I line about body length, I'm looking for probably 2/3 of the body length. I tie these in at a slight angle, let the tension of the thread pull them over to the top, and kind of see where I'm at there. So that's about right. I've got about 2/3 of the body length. I'll go ahead and wrap back just to where the base of my thread was, or where my thread stops. Just a little short, so I'm going to pull these back just a little bit more. Okay. And I got those about where I want them. Go ahead and secure that down through thread, and we're going to wrap back up to get the other switch here that I like. We're going to come back up to the lead, secure that down. Once we get there, we're going to build just a slight little ramp. Some people do this before. I like to do it after. Once I've got a little bit of a taper coming, and then we're going to wrap and secure that lead wire down. Kind of taper that up a little bit. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to tie in our ribbing material. And for this particular pattern, I like to use this fluorescent orange, which actually almost looks more like a yellow, like a matte yellow. Matte orange, matte yellow, something like that. We'll clip off a little piece. I'm using size brassy for this. You can also go gold to match the bead. I just like a little bit of contrast, particularly because we're going to put an orange hot collar on this. So to start with, I slot this I seat this right into the slot on the your side of me, away from me. I'm actually going to look to kind of tie this so it's just on that side of the hook shank. And I'm really going to try to almost tie this right down, the far side of the hook shank. Just really securing it. I want to keep this body profile as thin as possible is the key. And on this UTC thread, you can spin it counterclockwise, and it will flatten out your thread, which is nice. Once I get that kind of in place, we're going to go ahead and tie in our our body wrap, our body material. And for this, I'm using just pheasant tail in a brown. So the key on this is a lot of people, when I first started tying these, myself included, I try to grab off a big clump so that it would cover the body wraps with fewer rotations. The key here is really to get, what I've found is to try to strive for about 4 fibers. And if you get 4 fibers, it keeps the profile when you start this thing much slimmer, and still provides that coverage. So go ahead and the other thing is you want to keep all 4 fibers pretty flat. And so I'm going to start by just clipping off a little bit of the tip so I have enough to tie in. I'm going to tie this on my side of the hook. And I'm also tying it in a way that there's a sheen side and a flat side. I like tying it with the flat side facing me so that when I wrap it, it'll be a little bit duller and more natural looking rather than that sheen that comes off from some of those feathers. Just a personal preference. I don't know that it matters a whole bunch, but you're going to really tie this back to about where the wire is there and then start taking wraps forward, covering everything up. I like to do kind of a half wrap and half wrap back up with the flattened thread just to kind of get that taper going. Then I'm going to go ahead and, if you have a rotary vise, I like to put a little half hitch in here. Makes the thread stay where it's at, and you can use your secure it up there on the side and use the rotary function of your vise. So for this, so I tied these things in, and the sheen side should be facing you. I'm gonna actually, I'm gonna wrap them counter wrap. So wrap away from me, and then I'm gonna wrap my wire counter wrap the other way. So it doesn't really matter which way you do it as long as you do your wire one way and the fibers the other. So go ahead and take one wrap here and just make sure I get it kind of lined up right where I want it. Trying to keep these fibers as flat as possible, and then once I have them kind of where I want them, I can start to use the rotary function if you have that. If not, you can just keep wrapping. Each wrap you put your finger on here, and then you can reach under and hold it, keep it in place. Another little trick is this, if things get a little too sparse and spread out, you can use your thumbnail to kind of push these fibers back down and line them up. But once you kind of get going, it should go pretty smooth for you. And you kind of wrap that up. You don't have to get all the way up to the head because you're going to have a little layer of dubbing here. Go ahead and secure that up near the bead. Couple wraps over, one underneath. Reach in there wherever you finish. Clip it off. Just take a couple of wraps to kind of clean things up. And so this particular one, I went away over the hook away from me. So I'm going to come back towards me with my wire. And again, I want to put a little tension on this, and I want to start off fairly close wraps, but then get them pretty wide pretty quickly. So if anything, I think it looks better if you go more distant on your segmentation than closer together. It's just an aesthetic thing. Trying to get, maybe I'm not 12, I'm looking for 4 or so segment wraps. Not that all of them will show perfectly. It doesn't matter specifically, but I just like that segmentation look. You're looking for, a couple wraps over the top, a couple underneath, and then a couple back over. The key on this is you want to get enough tension on your thread and keep that tension without breaking it, and then you can just kind of helicopter or wiggle this wire off. It'll just break off like so. So we're going to go ahead and once we get that wire secured, we're going to tie off our brown thread. This part is optional. I like putting a nice hot collar on these, and so if you do that, you got to switch thread. So we've switched threads. I'm using a sorry, I don't have the label fell off this one. I've got a same UTC 70. This is a fluorescent orange, so I'm putting a hot collar on. So I'm going to tie this orange thread on, keeping it as close to the bead as I can. And reason for that is that it allows me to put less dubbing on. If I go too far to that, to the back of the fly, then I'm forced to put more dubbing to cover it all up. That's essentially what I'm saying. Okay, so first thing here, I'm just going to make sure my thread's tight. Put some wax on. For dubbing, I'm using a black, so a UV Ice Dub Peacock Black. And this stuff will go this dubbing goes a long way. A couple tricks here. And so number one, I used to put way too much dubbing on this pattern, and it would push back that direction and cover up like half the fly. These things look so much better if you can keep a nice tight profile and just a small amount of dubbing. Like I can't stress that enough, how much better the fly looks when you put a little bit of dubbing. The other thing I'll do is I'll kind of dab my fingers in my wax in addition to my string or my thread. So that when I can use my fingers and kind of spin and get that tension on the dubbing noodle. And so then when I wrap, I don't want to actually start back. I want to almost put this right up on the fly, right up on the bead, and let the tension of the thread sort of push it back over itself. And you'll see what I mean here. So you'll have a little bit of orange, and then as you wrap over the top, you just use that tension to kind of pull itself down, and it will keep that much thinner and a much smaller profile. The tension itself will kind of push that back, but then you don't have to be, wrapping the whole thing. So then once I get there, I'm just looking for, a couple wraps, and then I'm gonna whip finish. And, looking for maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 turns. Build up a little hot collar. Cinch that down. And we'll clip, and voila, we're all done. So this thing will actually ride like so in the water. But you get that nice, cool orange hot collar. You get the fluorescent orange, yellowish, matte wire counter wrapped rib. You get the, it's just a more durable fly with the tailing fibers being Coq de Leon, and just a nice productive pattern that I found. I like the wide gap jig. Again, it will ride like so in the water. Pretty quick little tie. You can tie a bunch of them up, 12s to, probably 16, 18s, somewhere in there is typically what I do. If you get too small, it gets a little bit harder, obviously, but and this will be an anchor fly, so I usually don't go much smaller than maybe 18s or so. But there it is, a little variant pattern of the Frenchie in the pheasant tail family. And I'll be sure to post a material list down below. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Be happy to try to answer those for you. And good luck. Give it a try.